Commander Jake Morrison walked into the huge white room where the Galactic Council held their trials. His boots made loud sounds on the smooth floor. Behind him, Lieutenant Amy Carter followed quietly. Both humans wore their blue uniforms, but Jake's face showed he was angry. The room was bigger than a football field. Tall seats rose up in circles around them. In those seats sat aliens from dozens of different worlds. Some looked like giant insects. Others had tentacles instead of arms. A few had scales that changed colors as they breathed. All of them were staring down at Jake and Amy. At the front of the room sat 3 judges. The middle one was a Zephyrian. Its skin was pale blue and smooth like glass. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind through metal pipes. "Commander Morrison," the Zephyrian said, "you stand accused of breaking the rules of engagement during the Kepler-7 incident. How do you answer?" Jake stood straight and tall. "I followed your rules exactly." "Every single one of them?" "Yes," said the judge on the left. This one was a Corion with gray skin and 4 arms. "You followed the rules, but 12 of your soldiers died, and the entire human colony was destroyed." "This concerns the Council." Amy felt her hands form fists. She had been there on Kepler-7. She had watched good people die because Jake had to ask permission before fighting back. The attackers had killed civilians while Jake waited for approval to use heavy weapons. "The rules say we cannot fire unless fired upon," Jake said. His voice was calm, but his eyes were hard. "The rules say we cannot use weapons that might hurt nearby buildings. The rules say we must give warnings before every attack. I followed all of these rules." "And because you followed them, people died," said the 3rd judge. This one was tall and thin with skin like tree bark. "Perhaps humans are not ready for the responsibility of protecting Council worlds." Jake's jaw moved like he was chewing something bitter. "Not ready? My people have been fighting your wars for 50 years. We have died on every world you asked to protect. We have followed every rule you made, even when those rules got us killed." The Zephyrian judge made a sound like air escaping from a tire. "The rules exist for good reasons, Commander. Without them, war becomes chaos. Innocent people suffer." "Innocent people suffered anyway," Jake said. "They suffered because I had to call you 3 times before I could shoot back. They suffered because I had to let the enemy escape rather than chase them into a school. They suffered because your rules cared more about buildings than lives." Amy remembered that day clearly. The attack had come without warning. Armed ships had landed near the colony and started shooting. Jake had called for permission to fight back. The Council had told him to wait. They needed to study the situation first. While they studied, colonists died. Men, women, and children ran through the streets as alien soldiers hunted them. Jake had to watch through his binoculars as families were killed. He could have stopped it in minutes, but the rules said no. When permission finally came, it was too late. The colony was burning. Most of the people were dead. Jake's soldiers had fought bravely, but they were ordered to be careful. "Be precise. Don't damage property. Don't hurt anyone who might be innocent." The enemy had no such rules. They killed everything that moved. "The Kepler-7 attackers were hegemony raiders," Jake said. "They have been hitting human colonies for months. We know where they come from. We know where they go. But your rules say we cannot follow them home." "Because following them would mean entering neutral space," the Corian judge said. "That could start a larger war. A larger war." Jake's voice got louder. "They are already at war with us. They just don't call it war because they only kill humans." The room got very quiet. Hundreds of alien eyes looked down at Jake. Some of them looked uncomfortable. Others looked angry. "Commander Morrison," the Zephyrian said, "you forget yourself. The Council has lost many brave soldiers from many worlds. Humans are not the only ones who sacrifice for peace." Jake laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Really? When was the last time a Zephyrian colony was attacked? When did Karian civilians last run for their lives? When did any of your people die because they had to follow rules that made no sense?" Looked around the room. She had studied the war reports. Jake was right. Human colonies were attacked almost every month. Human soldiers died in every battle. But the aliens in this room live safe lives on protected worlds. The rules apply too. Everyone, said the tree-like judge. No species gets special treatment. No, Jake said. The rules apply to us. When your people fight, you call it police action or peacekeeping. When we fight back, you call it concerning aggression. When your soldiers die, it's a tragedy. When mine die, it's acceptable losses. The Zephyrian judge's skin changed to a darker blue. You speak of things you don't understand. The galaxy is complex. Peace requires sacrifice. Whose sacrifice? Jake asked. I've read the reports. In the last 10 years, humans have fought in 300 battles. We've lost 8,000 soldiers. How many Zephyrians have died in combat? How many Carians? How many of any of you? No. One answered. Amy knew why. The answer was almost zero. The advanced alien species didn't fight anymore. They sent humans to do their fighting for them. The Council appreciates human dedication, the Carian judge said. But dedication without discipline is dangerous. The rules exist to protect everyone, including humans. The rules exist to protect you, Jake said. You're afraid of what might happen if we stop asking permission to defend ourselves. The room exploded with alien voices. Some species made clicking sounds. Others roared or whistled. The judges had to call for order several times. When it was quiet again, the Zephyrian spoke. Commander Morrison, you are out of line. The Council has shown great patience with human complaints, but this behavior cannot continue. Jake reached up to his uniform collar. There, pinned to his shirt, were the golden bars that showed his rank. Next to them was a small pin with the Council symbol on it. This pin meant he had sworn to follow Council law. You want to know what I think of your patience? Jake asked. He grabbed the Council pin and pulled it off his uniform. The metal made a small tearing sound as it came free. Every alien in the room froze. Amy's eyes went wide. Taking off the Council pin was like quitting the army. It meant Jake no longer recognized their authority. Jake held up the pin so everyone could see it. Then he opened his fingers and let it fall. It hit the floor with a tiny ringing sound that seemed as loud as thunder in the silent room. I've spent 15 years following your rules, Jake said. I've watched good people die because I had to ask permission to save them. I've seen colonies burn because stopping the fire might damage alien property. I've buried friends who died because the rules said their lives mattered less than politics. He reached up and pulled off his rank insignia too. The golden bars joined the Council pin on the floor. I'm done, Jake said. I'm done watching humans die for alien comfort. I'm done following rules that only apply to us. I'm done pretending this is about peace when it's really about keeping us under control. The Zephyrian judge leaned forward. Commander Morrison, if you resign your commission, you will have no authority to command human forces. You will be just another civilian. Jake smiled for the first time since entering the room. But it wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of a man who had just made a dangerous decision. Maybe, he said. Or maybe you'll find out what happens when humans stop playing by your rules. He turned and walked toward the door. Amy hesitated for just a moment, then followed him. Behind them, the alien judges called for order as the room erupted in chaos. Outside the courtroom, Jake stopped and looked at Amy. Are you with me, Lieutenant? Amy looked back at the closed door. Inside, hundreds of aliens were probably discussing what to do about the dangerous human, who had just told them he was done following orders. She reached up and pulled off her own Council pin. It fell to the floor next to Jake's. Yes, sir, she said. I'm with you. 3 hours after Jake Morrison walked out of the Council chambers, Captain Lisa Brooks was eating lunch in her ship's mess hall when her communication device made a soft beep. She looked at the screen and saw a message from a sender she didn't recognize. The message was short. The leash is off. Confirm receipt. Lisa stared at the words. She knew what they meant. For months, rumors had been spreading through the human fleet. Stories about secret meetings and hidden plans. Most people thought they were just stories. But Lisa had always suspected something was brewing. She typed back a single word. Confirmed. Her ship, the Starfire, was patrolling the Vega system. Officially, they were looking for pirates, but Lisa knew better. The pirates they were chasing flew ships that looked exactly like council member vessels. They attacked human settlements but never touched alien worlds. They always seemed to know exactly where human ships would be. Lisa had reported this to her superiors many times. Each time she was told to focus on her mission and not ask questions. The council would handle the investigation. But no investigation ever happened. The attacks kept coming 2 systems away. Major Chris Sullivan got the same message while he was cleaning his rifle. Chris commanded a unit that was supposed to be disbanded 6 months ago. On paper, his soldiers had been reassigned to different posts across the galaxy. In reality, they were all still together, living in an abandoned mining station on the edge of known space. The council thought Chris's unit was too dangerous. They were all veterans of the hegemony wars, and they knew how to fight dirty. More importantly, they knew how to win. The council preferred soldiers who followed orders without question. Chris's men had too many questions. Chris stood up and walked to the station's communication center. Within minutes, he was talking to dozens of other disbanded units. They were scattered across the galaxy, but they had never really broken contact. They had been waiting for this moment. "Time to earn our pay," Chris told his second-in-command, Sergeant Pete Davis. Pete smiled. "What's the first target?" "The Centauri Black Site," Chris said. "We've been watching it for months." Time to see what they're really doing there. Dr. Helen Rodriguez was working late in her lab when she received the message. She was officially a council research scientist studying alien biology. But her real job was much more interesting. She was copying every classified file she could find. For 3 years, Helen had been building a database of council crimes. She had records of illegal experiments, secret prisons, and systematic genocide. The council had been very careful to hide their activities, but they had made one mistake. They trusted humans to help them with their research. Helen's fingers flew across her keyboard as she accessed restricted files. She had been preparing for this moment for months. Every piece of evidence was already organized and ready to send. The galaxy was about to learn the truth about their peaceful leaders on the Outer Rim. Colonel Tony Mitchell was leading a patrol through the Helios Nebula when he got the message. His unit had been tracking unusual ship movements for weeks. Large alien vessels had been moving through the area, but they always disappeared before human ships could investigate. Tony had orders to avoid contact with unknown vessels. The council wanted to handle any diplomatic issues themselves, but Tony had never been good at following stupid orders. He had been waiting for an excuse to ignore them. "All units, this is Colonel Mitchell," he said into his radio. "We are changing our mission parameters. Target the alien convoy in Sector 7. No survivors." His pilots didn't ask questions. They had been frustrated with the rules for months. Now they finally had permission to do what they had been trained to do. The alien convoy was made up of 12 ships. They were heavily armed, but not expecting a fight. When Tony's fighters came out of the nebula, the aliens tried to run. They didn't make it very far. In the council capital, Admiral Kate Phillips was attending a boring meeting about supply routes when her aide handed her a small piece of paper. She read the message and smiled for the first time in months. Kate had been a council admiral for 10 years. She had watched as human fleets were slowly weakened by politics and bureaucracy. Ships were reassigned to safer duties. Experienced officers were replaced with aliens who had never seen real combat. The human fleet was becoming a joke, but Kate had been busy too. Every decommissioned human ship had been carefully hidden instead of destroyed. Every retired officer had been given a new secret assignment. The council thought they were dismantling human military power. Instead, they were creating a shadow fleet. Kate excused herself from the meeting and walked to her private office. She activated a secure communication channel that officially didn't exist. "This is Phoenix Command," she said. "Execute Order 7. Across the galaxy, humans began to move. Captain Danny Foster's ship changed course toward a council supply depot. Lieutenant Sarah Kim's squad abandoned their patrol route and headed For a known alien smuggling base? Commander Bill Turner's submarine left its underwater base and surfaced near a Council research station. The message had reached hundreds of human officers. Some were active duty Council forces. Others were supposedly retired or disbanded. Many were working jobs that had nothing to do with the military. But all of them had been waiting for this moment. Dr. Rodriguez finished copying the last files and activated her emergency transmission system. Every human ship in the galaxy would receive the data within hours. The evidence was clear and undeniable. The Council had been using humans as their personal army, while systematically eliminating any species that might threaten their power. The files showed that the pirate attacks on human colonies were actually Council operations. They were testing human responses and eliminating settlements that were becoming too independent. The same aliens who lectured humans about peace were secretly conducting a war of extermination. Major Sullivan's team reached the Centauri Black Site just as the sun was setting. The facility was built into a small moon hidden from normal sensors. According to the files Rodriguez had found, this was where the Council conducted their most secret experiments. The base was defended by Zephian, guards who had never faced serious opposition. They were used to dealing with captured civilians and broken prisoners. When Sullivan's team hit them with military-grade weapons and professional tactics, the guards crumbled in minutes. Inside the facility, Sullivan found exactly what he expected. Prison cells filled with humans who had asked too many questions. Laboratories where Council scientists were trying to find ways to control human aggression. Records showing that the Council had been drugging human food supplies for years. Take everything, Sullivan told his team. Every file, every computer, every piece of evidence. The galaxy needs to see this. Captain Brooks was studying the data from Rodriguez when her sensors detected alien ships approaching. 3 Council vessels were moving toward her position. Under normal circumstances, she would have waited for them to make contact. Council ships had authority over human vessels, but these weren't normal circumstances anymore. Battle stations, Brooks ordered. Target the lead ship. Fire when ready. Her crew moved with practiced efficiency. They had been drilling for this moment for months. The Council ships were larger and more heavily armed, but they were also slower and less maneuverable. More importantly, they weren't expecting a fight. The first Council ship exploded before it could raise its shields. The second one managed to fire a few shots before Brooks destroyed it too. The third ship tried to run, but Brooks's fighters caught it before it could escape. Similar scenes were playing out across the galaxy. Human forces were abandoning their posts and attacking Council targets. Years of careful planning were finally paying off. The Council had spent so much time controlling humans that they had forgotten humans were dangerous. In her lab, Rodriguez watched the reports coming in. Human ships were seizing Council bases. Human soldiers were freeing prisoners from secret facilities. Human scientists were broadcasting evidence of Council crimes to every world in the galaxy. The revolution had begun. And the Council was about to learn what happened when Deathworlders stopped playing by the rules. The Carrion fleet disappeared on a Tuesday morning while they were inspecting human cargo ships near the Tau Ceti system. 12 massive warships had been stopping human freighters for months, taking whatever they wanted and calling it legal searches. The human crews had no choice but to submit. Council law said Corians had the right to inspect any vessel in their territory. Admiral Kate Phillips was drinking coffee in her office when the report came in. The Corian fleet was simply gone. No distress signals, no wreckage, no survivors. Just empty space where 12 alien warships had been operating an hour before. The Council emergency broadcast came 20 minutes later. A Corian admiral with gray skin and 4 arms appeared on Kate's screen. His voice was high and angry. Admiral Phillips, we demand an explanation. 12 of our vessels have vanished in human space. This is an act of war. Kate set down her coffee cup and looked directly at the camera. Admiral Vex, your ships were found to be in violation of natural law. The situation has been corrected. Natural law? The Carian's 4 arms waved in confusion. What are you talking about? Kate smiled. She had been waiting months to give this speech. On my world, we have a saying. When you hunt something long enough, you might discover it was hunting you. Back, your ship spent 6 months treating human vessels as prey. They forgot that prey sometimes evolves. The Tarian admiral's skin turned a darker gray. You destroyed council vessels without authorization. This is murder. No, Kate said. Calmly, this is biology. Predators who grow too comfortable eventually forget that their prey might be more dangerous than they look. Your ships learned this lesson. Unfortunately, they learned it too late. She ended the transmission before the Karian could respond. Around the galaxy, similar conversations were happening. Human commanders were explaining to confused aliens that the rules had changed. The explanations were always polite, always calm, and always terrifying. Lieutenant Colonel Ben Martinez was having a different kind of conversation. He was standing in the middle of a burning city on Vega Prime, watching Velthan peacekeepers execute civilian protesters. The aliens had been doing this for hours, and the human garrison had been ordered to stand down. The Velthans were tall and thin with skin like green metal. They moved slowly and spoke in whispers, but they killed. Quickly, their weapons turned people into ash in seconds. They had been keeping the peace on Vega Prime for 3 years, and the peace looked like a graveyard. Ben had been watching through his binoculars as the peacekeepers lined up another group of civilians. Men, women, and children who had been protesting the new tax laws. The Velthans called it civil unrest. Ben called it murder. Sir, said Sergeant Lucy Chun, we have new orders. Ben looked at the message on his communication device. It was short and simple. The leash is off. Confirm receipt. Ben typed back, confirmed, and then looked at his soldiers. They were all watching him, waiting for orders. They had been forced to watch atrocities for months while the council debated. Proper responses, now they had permission to act. All units, Ben said into his radio, weapons free. Target the peacekeepers, no survivors. His soldiers moved like they had been waiting for this moment their whole lives. They had been trained to fight, not to stand around watching civilians die. The Velthans had grown so comfortable with human inaction that they didn't even notice Ben's team moving into position. The massacre ended in 30 seconds. The peacekeepers never saw it coming. One moment they were executing helpless civilians. The next moment they were facing weapons that weren't supposed to exist and soldiers who weren't asking permission to use them. Ben walked through the aftermath, checking on the civilians who had survived. A young girl with tears on her face looked up at him. Why didn't you help us before? She asked. Ben knelt down so he was at her eye level. Because we were following rules made by people who didn't care if you lived or died. We're not following those rules anymore. The girl nodded like she understood. Maybe she did? Children often understood things that adults tried to make complicated. On the other side of the galaxy, Captain Michelle Turner was having her own revelation. Her ship, the Defiant, had been hiding in an asteroid field for 3 months. Officially, she was on a deep space patrol. In reality, she was watching Council shipping routes and taking notes. The Council had been very careful to hide their secret activities. But they had to move supplies and personnel like everyone else. Michelle had been tracking their movements, learning their patterns, and mapping their hidden bases. When the message came through, Michelle was ready. Her ship emerged from the asteroid field like a ghost returning to life. The Council freighter she had been watching didn't even see her coming. Unidentified vessel, came the transmission from the freighter. You are entering restricted space. Identify yourself immediately. Michelle keyed her radio. This is Captain Michelle Turner of the Human Colonial Navy. You are carrying slaves. From the Rigel system, surrender immediately or be destroyed. Human Colonial Navy? The alien voice sounded confused. There is no such organization. You are a council vessel operating without authority. Not anymore, Michelle said. We just declared independence. Now surrender or die. The freighter tried to run. Michelle's ship was faster. The freighter tried to fight. Michelle's weapons were better. The freighter tried to call for help. Michelle's jammers made sure no one could hear them. When it was over, Michelle's boarding party found exactly what they expected. The ship was carrying 300 human prisoners, all of them supposedly criminals who had been sentenced to rehabilitation. The rehabilitation involved slave labor and council mining operations. Michelle's medical officer, Dr. Frank Wilson, examined the prisoners. They were all malnourished and showed signs of abuse. Many of them had been drugged to make them more compliant. "How long have they been doing this?" Dr. Wilson asked. "According to the ship's logs, about 50 years, Michelle said. "Maybe longer. They've been very careful to hide it." The prisoners were mostly people who had asked uncomfortable questions about council policies, scientists who had discovered inconvenient facts, journalists who had written critical articles, politicians who had opposed council decisions. All of them had been quietly disappeared and shipped off to work camps. "What do we do with them?" asked Michelle's first officer, Lieutenant Mark Johnson. "Take them home," Michelle said, "and make sure everyone knows what happened to them. The galaxy needs to understand what the council really is." Meanwhile, Dr. Helen Rodriguez was broadcasting her evidence to every world in the galaxy. The files she had copied showed a pattern of systematic oppression that went back centuries. The council hadn't just been controlling humans. They had been eliminating any species that showed signs of becoming too independent. The evidence was overwhelming. Secret prisons, illegal experiments, mass executions disguised as accidents. The council had been running a galaxy-wide extermination program while preaching peace and cooperation on the council capital world. Emergency meetings were being held around the clock. The carefully constructed facade of galactic government was crumbling. Human forces were operating independently across the galaxy, and there was no way to stop them. The council had always controlled humans through bureaucracy and rules. Take away the bureaucracy, and humans became something else entirely. They became what they had always been underneath, the most dangerous predators in the galaxy. Admiral Kate Phillips received dozens of panicked calls from council members. They wanted to negotiate, to find a peaceful solution. But Kate had learned something important from the council's own playbook. Sometimes the best response to a demand for negotiation was silence. The humans weren't negotiating anymore. They were hunting, and the council was about to learn what it felt like to be prey. The council had always believed they were the smart ones. They had technology, they had numbers, and they had centuries of experience ruling the galaxy. What they discovered over the next week was that intelligence meant nothing when your enemy had been preparing for war while you were preparing for meetings. Every decommissioned human warship had been a lie. Colonel Ryan Hayes learned this when he arrived at the Tarsus system to liberate the prison world. He expected to find a small research station defended by a few guards. Instead, he found a massive military base that had been hiding in plain sight for years. The human colonial authority had been building ships in secret for decades. Not just a few vessels, but entire fleets. They had been disguised as cargo haulers, research ships, and mining platforms. When the rebellion began, these ships shed their fake outer hulls and revealed weapons that made council technology look like toys. Ryan's flagship, the Liberty, was officially a decommissioned cruiser that had been sold for scrap 20 years ago. In reality, it had been completely rebuilt with technology that the council didn't even know existed. The ship's engines were twice as powerful as anything in the council fleet. Its weapons could punch through council shields like they were made of paper. "Sir," said his communications officer, Lieutenant Nancy Price, "we're getting signals from the prison world. The guards are demanding we identify ourselves." Ryan looked at the planet through his ship's view screen. Tarsus had been a secret council facility for 30 years. Officially, it was a research station studying dangerous alien diseases. Unofficially, it was where the council sent people who asked too many questions. Political prisoners, scientists who discovered inconvenient truths, and anyone else who threatened the established order. "Tell them we're here for a prisoner exchange," Ryan said. "We're trading their lives for the lives of everyone they've been holding." The guards tried to negotiate. They offered to release some prisoners in exchange for safe passage. Ryan's response was simple. He ordered his ships to begin bombardment of the guard stations. The message was clear: there would be no deals. The prison guards were Zephyrians who had never faced real combat. They had been chosen for their loyalty to the Council, not their military skills. When Ryan's Marines landed on the planet, the guards surrendered within hours inside the prison. Ryan found horrors that made him understand why the rebellion had been necessary. Thousands of humans were locked in cells designed for torture rather than containment. Many of them had been there for years, forgotten by the galaxy and abandoned by their own species. Dr. Patricia Moore had been imprisoned for 15 years. She had been a council scientist who discovered that the alien diseases being studied on Tarsus were actually bioweapons designed to target human genetics. When she tried to report this, she was arrested for treason and sent to die in a cell. How many people know about this place? Ryan asked her. No one, Patricia said. The council made sure of that. Everyone who worked here was either killed or imprisoned. This place officially doesn't exist. Ryan looked around the prison complex. There were dozens of buildings, each one filled with political prisoners from across the galaxy. Not just humans, but members of any species that had opposed council rule. The council had been running a secret police state for centuries. It exists now, Ryan said. And everyone is going to know about it. Captain Michelle Turner was having similar revelations in the Rigel system. Her ship had been tracking council supply convoys for months, but she had no idea how extensive their operations were. When she followed one convoy to its destination, she found an entire star system that had been turned into a slave camp. The official record said the Rigel system was uninhabited. In reality, it contained millions of beings from dozens of different species. They were all working in mines and factories, producing weapons and supplies for the council. The workers lived in conditions that would have been illegal on any civilized world. Michelle's fleet had been reinforced by ships that officially didn't exist. Captain Tom Harris arrived in the Vengeance, a heavy cruiser that had been destroyed in a battle 5 years ago. Commander Lisa Brooks came in the Starfire, which had been decommissioned and sold to civilian contractors. Both ships had been secretly upgraded with weapons that the Council had never seen before. How many systems like this are there? Michelle asked her intelligence officer, Lieutenant Carl Roberts. According to the data from Dr. Rodriguez, at least 50, Carl said. The Council has been building a slave empire while preaching about freedom and democracy. The slave camps were defended by automated systems rather than living guards. The Council had learned that organic beings sometimes developed consciences. Robots never questioned orders to kill workers who became too weak to be useful. Michelle's ships made short work of the automated defenses. The robots were programmed to fight other Council vessels, not human ships with unknown technology. When the defenses fell, Michelle's Marines landed and began freeing the prisoners. The rescued slaves told stories that made Michelle's blood run cold. Families had been separated and sold to different facilities. Children were raised as workers, from birth never knowing they had rights or families. Anyone who protested was killed as an example to others. We've been fighting the wrong enemy, Michelle told her crew. The Council isn't just corrupt, they're evil. Meanwhile, Admiral Kate Phillips was discovering the scope of the Council's deception. Her intelligence teams had been analyzing the data from Dr. Rodriguez, and the picture that emerged was worse than anyone had imagined. The Council had been systematically eliminating every species that showed signs of independence. They would start with economic pressure, then move to political manipulation, and finally resort to military action. The process was so gradual that most species never realized what was happening until it was too late. Humans had been the Council's enforcers without knowing it. Every time they fought pirates or terrorists, they were actually helping the Council eliminate potential threats. The hegemony wars that had made human soldiers famous were really wars of extermination against species that had tried to resist Council rule. We've been their attack dogs for 50 years, Kate said to her staff. Every battle we fought, every life we took, it was all part of their plan to control the galaxy. The worst part was how easily the Council had manipulated human emotions. They had convinced humans that they were fighting for peace and justice. They had made humans believe that their enemies were evil monsters who deserved to die. The truth was that most of those enemies had been trying to protect their own people from Council oppression. Kate's intelligence officer, Commander Paul Martinez, brought her the most disturbing news. Admiral, we found evidence that the Council has been using humans as test subjects for biological weapons. They've been putting chemicals in our food and water to study how they affect human physiology. How long has this been going on? Kate asked. At least 20 years, Paul said. Maybe longer. They've been treating us like laboratory animals. Kate felt a rage building inside her that she had never experienced before. She had spent her entire career serving the Council, believing that she was protecting innocent people. Now she discovered that the Council had been experimenting on her own species while she helped them conquer the galaxy. Send a message to all human forces, Kate said. Tell them what we've found. Tell them that the Council has been poisoning us, enslaving us, and using us as weapons against other innocent species. Tell them that we're not just fighting for our freedom anymore, we're fighting for our survival. The message went out across the galaxy, and the human response was immediate. Ships that had been holding back joined the rebellion. Soldiers who had been uncertain about fighting their former allies now understood what was at stake. The Council had made a fatal mistake. They had assumed that humans would remain loyal even after learning the truth. Instead, they had created an enemy that understood exactly how dangerous the Council really was. The war was no longer about following rules or breaking them. It was about survival, and humans were very good at surviving. The war lasted 3 weeks, not because the fighting was difficult, but because it took that long for the Council to realize they had already lost. The first week was chaos. Council fleets tried to mobilize, but they discovered that their ships wouldn't start. Human engineers had been maintaining Council vessels for decades, and they had built hidden kill switches into every system. When the rebellion began, those switches were activated. Half the Council fleet was stranded in port with engines that wouldn't run. The ships that did manage to launch faced a different problem. They had been designed by humans, built by humans, and maintained by humans. Every weakness, every blind spot, every design flaw was already known. Human forces didn't need to outfight the Council fleet. They just needed to exploit problems that had been built into the ships from the beginning. Admiral Kate Phillips watched the Battle of Proxima with grim satisfaction. 12 Council battleships had arrived to retake the system from human rebels. They were massive vessels, each one carrying enough firepower to destroy a small planet. But they were also slow, predictable, and vulnerable in ways their crews didn't understand. Kate's fleet was smaller, but her ships were faster and more maneuverable. More importantly, they knew exactly where to shoot. The Council battleships had been designed with hidden weak points that looked like accident. A small gap in the armor here, a vulnerable power coupling there. The human engineers who built them had been very clever. Target their reactor cooling systems, Kate ordered. 3 shots, then move to the next target. Her ships moved like dancers, weaving between the massive Council vessels and striking at precise points. The Council ships fired back, but their weapons were designed to fight other Council vessels, not human ships with unknown capabilities. Within an hour, all 12 Council battleships were either destroyed or drifting powerless in space. Kate's fleet had lost only 1 ship, and that was because a young pilot had gotten too aggressive and flown into debris. The second week was worse for the Council. Their bureaucracy, which had been so effective at controlling others, became their greatest weakness. Every decision had to be approved by committees. Every action required forms and authorizations. Every response needed to be debated and voted on. Humans didn't debate. They acted. General Sam Williams had been a Council logistics officer for 20 years. He knew exactly how the Council supply system worked, and he knew how to break it. While Council politicians were arguing about responses to the rebellion, Sam was cutting off their food, fuel, and ammunition. The Council had always assumed that humans were too primitive to understand galactic economics. They were wrong. Humans had been managing Council supply chains for decades, and they knew exactly which systems to target. Sam's teams hit 12 key manufacturing worlds in one day. They didn't destroy the factories. Instead, they freed the workers and shut down production. Without slaves to run their machines, the Council's war economy ground to a halt. Other human forces were targeting communication networks, transportation hubs, and administrative centers. The Council had built their empire on the assumption that humans would continue to maintain their systems. When humans stopped cooperating, the empire collapsed. Dr. Helen Rodriguez was broadcasting evidence of Council crimes to every world in the galaxy. The files she had copied showed that the Council's peaceful facade had been hiding genocide, slavery, and systematic oppression for centuries. Species that had supported the Council began to reconsider their positions. The Altarians withdrew their fleets from Council space. The Centauri Federation declared neutrality. The Vegan Alliance began openly supporting the human rebellion. The Council's network of allies crumbled as species realized they had been supporting monsters. By the third week, the Council was begging for negotiations. They offered to release all human prisoners, to grant humans independence, to pay reparations for past crimes. But their offers fell on deaf ears. Ambassador Ellen Foster stood in the same tribunal chamber where Jake Morrison had been condemned 3 weeks earlier. But the roles had completely reversed. The Council members who had once sat in judgment now occupied the defendant's dock, their hands bound and their faces showing fear. Ellen had been chosen to represent humanity in the War Crimes Tribunal. She was a former Council diplomat who had resigned in protest years earlier when she discovered what the Council really was. Now she was prosecuting the beings who had once been her employers. The evidence is overwhelming, Ellen told the mixed jury of humans and alien species. For over 2 centuries, the Council has conducted a systematic campaign of genocide against any species that showed signs of independence. They have enslaved billions of beings, conducted illegal experiments, and used humans as unwitting weapons. In wars of extermination, the lead defendant was the Zephyrian who had condemned Jake Morrison. His blue skin had turned pale and his voice shook when he spoke. "We were maintaining order," he said. A galaxy needed strong leadership. Without the Council, there would have been chaos and war. Ellen smiled coldly. There was chaos and war. You just hid it from the species you were manipulating. You convinced us that we were fighting for peace while you used us to commit genocide. The evidence was undeniable. Dr. Rodriguez had compiled thousands of documents showing the Council's crimes. Video recordings of mass executions, medical reports from illegal experiments, financial records showing the slave trade, communications between Council members discussing the human problem and how to keep Deathworlders under control. The trial lasted only 2 days. The jury, which included representatives from dozens of species, returned a unanimous guilty verdict. The sentence was exile to a prison world where the Council members would experience the same conditions they had imposed on others. Commander Jake Morrison, now wearing the insignia of the Human Colonial Authority, watched from the gallery as the verdicts were read. His decision to walk out of the Council chamber had triggered a revolution that changed the galaxy forever. "Do you think we did the right thing?" asked Amy Carter, who now served as his second in Command. Jake thought about the question. Millions of beings had died in the rebellion. Entire star systems had been devastated. The galaxy's political structure had been completely destroyed. "Look at the evidence," Jake said. "Look at what they were doing to us, to everyone. They were slowly killing every species in the galaxy, and they were using us to do it. We didn't start this war. We just finished it." The new galactic government was very different from the Council. Instead of a central authority that controlled everything, it was a loose confederation of independent species. Each world could govern itself as long as it didn't threaten others. There were no universal laws, no bureaucratic oversight, no rules about what species could or couldn't do. The humans had learned an important lesson from the Council's mistakes. The most dangerous government was one that claimed to know what was best for everyone. The new system was messier, louder, and more chaotic than the old one. But it was also more honest. General Sam Williams, now serving as humanity's military coordinator, outlined the new reality in a speech to the Reformed Galactic Assembly. "We're not going to rule you," he said. "We're not going to tell you how to live or what to believe. But we're also not going to let anyone else rule you either. If you want to be free, you have to be willing to fight for that freedom." The galaxy had learned a lesson that would echo through the ages. The most dangerous enemy wasn't the one who looked strong, but the one who had been holding back. The Deathworlders had stopped playing by the rules, and every species in the galaxy would have to live with the consequences. Some species thrived in the new order, others struggled to adapt. But all of them understood one simple truth: humans were no longer anyone's servants. They were the guardians of galactic freedom, and they would never again allow anyone to use them as weapons against innocent people. The age of the Council was over. The age of the Deathworlders had begun.